All right, it's time to bring in Joey Wagner as we do our 6-pack of questions. The first time we're bringing it out this year. Didn't do it last week for EIU because I just didn't feel like we needed to. Kind of did it with all the season preview stuff, but now we know a little bit more about this team, and we're going to learn a lot more, Joey, against Kansas. Illinois is a 5-point favorite the last I checked. 55 was the total the last I checked, and a sold out Memorial Stadium, but looking forward to this because this feels like the first game of the year, to be honest.
Right, it does. Illinois 5-point dog, correct? Kansas is favored coming into Memorial Stadium. Yeah, it's announced it was a sellout. It's kind of been trending that way as a possibility for the last couple of days. And you got a sense, Jeremy, before we get into this, I know that's our first topic to bring up, you got a sense Brett Bielema on Monday was kind of laying the foundation of, hey, this is a big one here. He brought up the ticket sales. He brought up, which I don't want to paraphrase what he said, but basically like, hey, this is his first sellout, right? I mean, this is his first sellout as a head coach at Illinois, first since 2016. You just got a big game vibe from him and understand what's at stake, right? And we'll get into that, but you can really generate a lot of belief among the fan base on Saturday.
Well, let's just dive right into it then, Joey, because it is, I think, a huge storyline in that this is a sellout. This is the first sellout since 2016. Lovie Smith going up against North Carolina and Mitch Trubisky. And we all remember Keyshawn Vaughn taking that touchdown, thinking, oh, this could be an arrival moment for the Illinois program. Lovie Smith leaves a stamp on this program right away. Of course, it went all downhill from there as North Carolina wins 48-23. It's a 3-9 season. The next year is really rock bottom at 2-10. But this is year 4 for Brett Bielema and what has been a far more competitive program with a ranked team coming into town in Kansas at number 19, a Kansas team that beat you. But what does this sellout tell you most of all about, I guess, the fan base, Illinois as a program?
I think they're ready to believe, right? And I say that, and I understand that they had good crowds in 2022 down the stretch. They really blew an opportunity to go to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. But they're back. Like they want to jump on board with this. And honestly, Jeremy, given how last season went, I didn't know that it would happen this early. I thought that fans who – look, I'm not trying to knock Illinois fans. These guys have been through a lot as a fan base, right? Like they've seen some crappy football, and they've kind of – they've had the football pulled out on them a number of times as fans, thinking things are back. I thought if they beat Kansas and you go to Nebraska and you do something, I thought, okay, maybe that Purdue game, maybe that Michigan, like maybe that can be those can be the games that people jump back in if you've given them a reason to believe early. And they said, hey, we'll do it for this Kansas game and we'll go all in and we believe in you and the product, the way you've gone about building. I think that's a big thing. And Brett Bielema's process, I think, is very sound. Like if this doesn't work for him, I'm not going to point to the process,
right? Because
it's been sound. I think people are seeing that. They're just ready, man. They're ready to jump on. They're ready to believe. And this game you've got 2 points, right? You've got what was such a low point last year in Lawrence, the way that you looked offensively, defensively, and now it's the same 2 teams. You've got the major players back from those 2 teams. Obviously, there's some moving and shifting, Jeremy, that we can get into with rosters and coaching staffs. But you have that again at the same point of the season, and now you've got a chance to say we are X better than we were this time last year. I think there's value to that for a fan base that wants to jump on board.
One, I think it tells you, like, despite some disappointment, the season ticket fan base is kind of held, right? And actually improved the last couple of years under Brett Bielema. So you don't have to move as many single game tickets. I think everyone knew this would be a 1-0 Illinois team against a 1-0 Kansas team, and that Kansas would be ranked. So I think people in the offseason said, hey, this is the second week of the season, one of the premier matchups outside of Michigan. This is probably the premier matchup at home, right? So I think that had something to do with it. But I think people just know how much this game actually means for the program, given the schedule that is coming up, that you have 2 road games in the Big Ten, Nebraska and Penn State, to kick off conference play. And then you have Michigan and Oregon, 2 top 10 teams next month. This is a really pivotal game for them. But I gotta be honest with you, I'm like you. I'm kind of shocked that this could sell out. And of course, you can give away tickets here or there and whatever, but still, people are buying a lot of tickets to come to this game. And there's only been one other non-conference sellout for Illinois since 1987. 88. I looked that up. My lifetime, Joey. There's only been one. That was that North Carolina game. So this is a rarity. But I think this is what Illinois got to take advantage of, is now go win the game and go make this not such a bad occurrence, because this could be the start of many future sellouts, right? I mean, this is a bad decade and a half of football that Illinois fans have been dealing with. And I'm with you. They are ready to believe in something. And I think they want to believe. They see that the product has been better, that Illinois is close, and that, hey, they may have to do their part and make it a better home field advantage. They're going to do that. They did that against Eastern Illinois. The students, kudos to you guys. You have shown up throughout the Brett Bielema era. I thought against Eastern Illinois, that was one of the better atmospheres we have seen at Memorial Stadium. I think Illinois is doing a lot of great things surrounding the game, and the player intros were fantastic. So I think they just built up some excitement about the experience, but then you got to put it on the field. And this is a big prove it game, I think, for the fan base. If they win this one, Joey, I think they're going to have season ticket sales really, I don't know if skyrocket, but really boost the rest of the season, because people want to be a part of that. And they think this is going to be a bowl team. If they lose, I think it's more like the North Carolina game in 2016, where it's like, okay, it's just Illinois football again, and we'll see if they can scrape 6 wins together.
Yeah, and then see, are you within 6 wins in late October, to get us back? And I get it. Like, someone who hasn't kind of followed the emotions of this program as closely might hear that and be like, are you serious? But Illinois fans they've been through it. They have.
Yeah.
They just have. And I understand if you're struggling to want to jump on board. I'm not saying hey, don't come back until they're good. But I get it. If people
have every reason to have doubt.
Right. Now, here's what you brought up with the North Carolina game. And this is a term I'd been throwing around a little bit over the last 24 hours, because that North Carolina game felt like it could have been an arrival moment. I don't know that I have that same feeling with this game. To me, and I know it hasn't been all positive since this moment, but going into Madison and doing what you did to Wisconsin in 2022 felt like that moment to me. So maybe this is a re-energizing moment, but it felt like the arrival moment came in Madison. It was oh, wait, you can go into Wisconsin and beat Wisconsin? That's what a concept. And they did that, and that's what it felt like. Hey, if anyone's going to do this, Brett Bielema feels like he's going to be the guy.
I was just looking for a record book here, because most of Brett Bielema's big wins are on the road at Illinois, right? There hasn't been a lot of big wins at home. You think of the disappointments of 2022, we're at home. Last year, Nebraska at home. What a disaster that really was for Illinois. Indiana was a big win last year, but you need to win that game. It was just the way you won that game was really exciting. But some of the Minnesota wins you've had on the road, Penn State, obviously. So can you get one at home? Illinois has not been a very good home team against this level of opponent. So yeah, I just think it's really, really big. I think this fan base really wants to believe, Joey, and there's a chance to get them in here.
I agree. And the fact that it's a 6 o'clock game, and I don't think that you're too far from this line of thinking, Illinois in the Big Ten has one of the better spaces, not atmosphere necessarily always, but spaces for tailgating. There's a ton of area around Memorial Stadium. People will likely be there all day Saturday. They ought to be, right? Go make this something. And 6 o'clock game, you go in, you have a good time, and go from there. Then look, it'll be on the ticker, right? The ESPN ticker, number 19 Kansas upset by Illinois, if that's what happens. And all of a sudden there's some buzz. Now there's that snowball's going downhill a little bit.
It'll be on the ticker regardless, because it's a ranked opponent. But it's a national story if Illinois wins this game, and they'll pick it for College Game Day, right? But one last thing, is this a case for actually scheduling a tough non-conference opponent? Is this a case against going for the 3 wins and actually having Missouri, right? Is that I love the home and home compared to the neutral site for that, because there is excitement in these games. These are more entertaining, and I don't mind scheduling entertaining games. It does potentially come at a cost of getting you to the postseason, where that's obviously the goal for Illinois, is just to continue to get to bowl games before taking the next step.
Yeah, it's the case if you can get to 6 some other way. If you feel really, really good about finding your way to 6 wins, absolutely. And that's just the growth and evolution of a program, right? And how that you would feel better against some of these, there's a list of 7, 8 toss-up games that we've talked about all offseason. If you can feel comfortable about condensing that list to 4 toss-up games, yeah, of course it's the case to schedule these and get this, what should be a pretty good atmosphere for a night game at Memorial Stadium. But I understand where it's like, can they get to 6 wins with a Kansas, with a Missouri, with, I know Duke has come up, like, yeah, if you see that and you think, I don't know, then all of a sudden, like, a bowl is more important than this feeling on a early September night.
In a 4-8 season or something like that. Yeah, right. Like the 2026 schedule, I think it's Duke, Missouri, and 9 Big Ten opponents. I don't think you'll ever see that again for Illinois. All right, question number 2, Joey. Which Illini has the most to prove on Saturday night?
Do we have the same answer?
Of course.
It's Aaron Henry. It's Aaron Henry. It has to be Aaron Henry. You talked about how much of a learning moment that was for him in Lawrence last season, and it was bad. I mean, it just was. There was no answer for Kansas offensively. It just kind of felt like, what is going on here? They didn't have a counter when Kansas started going at those linebackers. What was the counter? It just felt like after halfway through the first quarter, early second quarter, it's like, oh, wow, they're really not going to. Like, there's no suspense here.
It felt like they were overconfident, in their defensive backs to be able to hold up in man-to-man coverage. But then they had 2 linebackers on the field, and that ended up being a terrible mistake. Like, you got to have speed against this kind of speed team. So, yeah, just it is an apples-to-apples comparison, right, of how much do you improve as a coordinator, as a game planner, and maybe self-evaluator of your own team going into this year. So I think absolutely it's a great first test for Aaron Henry. And I bet he's been gearing up for this game for a long time, Joey, because he said he watched it almost 100 times. And I can believe that because everything was going pretty well for Aaron Henry in his career to this point. 34 years old. He's a defensive coordinator of a Big Ten program, right? He had a really good performance in his first game as a defensive coordinator against Mississippi State, holding that offense in check. And then, you're able to beat Toledo. Was a great performance by the offense, but you're able to win, and Miles Scott's interception played a big role in that. So it was a pretty good start. And then this one really had to be jolting to him.
Yeah, it had to be. And here's the thing, Jeremy. I don't believe for a second. There's been kind of some alluding to this over the course of the last few months. They started prepping on Kansas well before getting to those offices on Friday night. Like, they have, and not just the coaches. Like, I truly believe that in practice they've gone up against some Kansas stuff for the players. Yeah. So that, like, they've gotten a head start on this. And now Kansas probably has to, right? Like, that's just the reality of how this works. But yeah, things were good for him. And like, we left Tampa that year after that ReliaQuest Bowl, like, all right. Then you get to Toledo, and I don't think anyone would blame the defense in that Toledo game. The offense really struggled. I mean, that's kind of gets overlooked a little bit. The offense really struggled to get off the ground in the first half of last season. And then everything failed against Kansas. And that's what it's kind of like oh boy, there might be some trouble afoot here. And this could be a long year.
I think the other one is Luke Altmaier here, right? Like, you kind of have a head-to-head against Jalen Daniels. They're not going against each other, but you have to keep pace with that offense and that Kansas offense. And this Kansas defensive front doesn't scare me. So I do want to see the Illinois offensive line like win in the trenches, which they did not do last year. We thought they would, and they did not do, and they struggled mightily. Austin Booker kind of made his name in last year's game against Illinois. But this Kansas secondary is really good. Kobe Bryant, Melo Dotson are studs at the college level and probably going to be NFL players. Their safeties are very, very experienced. So this passing offense, I think it's a big prove-it game because you're going to go up against a lot of great defenses in the Big Ten. And, I think this Kansas secondary is probably similar to what you'll go up against Nebraska and Penn State, like 2 teams that I think have pretty good defenses going into the year. So I think it's a big game for them and a big game for the wide receivers to win some of these one-on-one matchups. Because I thought Luke pulled the trigger and really let his receivers go make plays and put it in great spots. He's going to have to do that again. But the receivers, Pat Bryant, Malik Elzy, Zachary Franklin, all those guys are going to have to go make plays too.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I mean, the kind of, we've talked a lot all offseason about the next step for Luke Altmaier, and that's confidence and it's comfort. And in this case, that might be go win your team a football game.
Yeah.
right? And that's really like, can you be that guy?
Are you a dude?
Can you be that?
I think we know Luke Altmaier's a pretty good quarterback, good talent, all of that. The next step is going to win your team games, and I think that's fun to watch. It's fun to watch that process, and now I think there's a great opportunity for him to do it. But for Illinois to win, Luke Altmaier is going to have to play really, really well.
Yeah, they're going to put up some points. Like I expect both these teams to be in the 30s, right? I mean, that's not a hot take here. So can Luke Altmaier in a big game, a game that means a lot to this program, he's got the arm talent to do it, I think. I mean, we've seen him make some throws that you're like, wow. Like that throw to Pat Bryant for a touchdown against Eastern Illinois, that was a pro throw. That was a next-level throw where he put that football.
Elsie.
To Elsie as well on the other side of the end zone there. But can you go out-duel, outgun a quarterback at Kansas that's really freaking good? And you'll probably need some help from your defense here or there, right? There's going to have to be a moment critically. But if you can keep pace with that offense, you're going to show people a heck of a lot about you and the steps that you've actually taken in the offseason. And no disrespect to what he did against Eastern Illinois, because I thought he looked really good against Eastern Illinois. This is just a different beast.
Yeah. And Barry Lunny said that too. It's like, yep, the game, bigger challenge ahead.
Barry Lunny's whole press conference on Monday was like, yep, all right, Kansas. Still Kansas. There's tougher games. Like, obviously he wasn't trying to put down what his team did against Houston, Illinois, but he wasn't going to get bogged in the narratives of like, wow, look at you guys throwing it around. He was like, effectively, let's chat next week.
Hey guys, we beat EIU. Yeah. Like, yeah. He's not doing that. All right, number 3. I'll start us off here, Joey. What gives you hope the Illinois offense can put up a better fight this time around against Kansas? I think it has to be a rushing attack, right? Like last year, I went back, Joey, their first 4 drives, 17 plays, 42 yards. The defense was awful. The offense was too to start that game. They couldn't move the ball. And the offensive line was a huge issue in that game. We talk about pass protection. Jai Chrysler got exposed. He was not a right tackle and forced that change. But they couldn't run the ball either. And I think that was the game I said, maybe these running backs that we think are going to be good, like, are they good enough? Is Reggie Love and Josh McCray, are they good enough players to make the plays they need to make? I think Caden Fagan is. I think Aiden Lawfrey gives you a different level of talent than you had in your top couple backs last year. And plus, I think your offensive line is probably more physical. I think you're better on the interior. They still got to improve a little bit, but those tackles, man, I thought they made a really good first impression. So I think it's just the ability to be balanced and run the football. And I'm not saying Illinois needs to ground and pound and eat up the clock the entire time, but they have to possess the ball, right? Like you got to put together some good drives to keep Kansas's offense off the field. So, obviously we talked about Altmaier, but I think just the ability, I have confidence that Caden Fagan is going to get yards against Kansas. And then you add Aiden Lawfrey, like there's just more you had to deal with in this rushing attack, I think.
Yeah, I am with you. I was thinking that we were talking to Caden Fagan yesterday. Remember, he got in very, very late in that game, had a carry that went for like 5 yards, which in that game, that was like, whoa, they can do 5 yards in one carry. That's wild. But his presence, what I believe is a jump, Jeremy, from last season, his comfort in the system, just physically what he brings to the table, that gives you confidence that Luke Altmaier, for as much as we do think he needs to go be that dude, make those plays, win that game, Caden Fagan should help in that regard. He should. I mean, he is a freak. He just is a freak. He's a huge guy, runs fast. That and the offensive line, like those two kind of go hand in hand. For me, last season, the offensive line, Jai Chrysler, I don't know how many practices he had at right tackle prior to that Kansas game. He obviously had Toledo.
Might have been 2 weeks of practices, right?
Yeah, he was very, very limited. And then obviously, I think just beyond being limited from a practice standpoint, I think it just became visibly clear he is not a tackle at the Big Ten level. So I just think being a little more solidified up front, pairing that with a running back who doesn't lose yards very often, who stays ahead of the chain. So it's 2-3 yard carries. I think Jay Lehman mentioned it. The other, like those add up over the course of a game, whether you fall forward for a couple more here or there. I just believe in the line. I really do. Melvin Priestley's got stuff to clean up, but he made some holy crap blocks against, of course, Eastern Illinois. I have very little questions about J.C. Davis still. I gotcha.
I thought he was really good.
Right, yeah. Like, know what you are. The interior has been through this. They've done that. Pair that with a running back who's been through it and done that. And then remember, Aiden Lawfrey at this point last year, Jeremy, was like, what can you reasonably get from him? He was more of an idea of speed than somebody who actually produced on the football field. And maybe that still is to a degree true. I mean, if depends on how much stock you want to put into Eastern Illinois. I just think they're more equipped to run the ball and make life a little bit easier on Luke Altmaier.
All right, number 4, the inverse. What gives you hope this defense can put up a better fight this time around, Joey?
Matthew Bailey. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but it's Matthew Bailey. He has proven to, like, you feel when he's on the football field. You feel it, you see it, all of those things. He was watching this game from his apartment in Champaign last year. He did not travel to that game. And he said he was frustrated. He said, I didn't know what was going wrong. You can't see everything on the TV broadcast. And then he got into film and understood it, but he looked really good against Eastern Illinois. And again, Jeremy, like every time we say this, like caveat, yeah, Eastern Illinois, Matthew Bailey at that position, it's not just a free safety position that causes chaos, mayhem, if you will, right? Matthew Bailey, that Sidney Brown role, does the same thing. He does it pre-snap. I was obsessed with what he did pre-snap against Eastern Illinois. And then he goes and he leads the team in tackles as kind of this de facto linebacker who can kind of do all things. I just feel like his presence, we've talked a lot about it this offseason, but it freaking matters.
You mentioned it, like it's Eastern Illinois, but you could just feel it. Like you could feel Caden Fagan was different, right? The other night, you could feel that Luke Altmaier was just a little bit more decisive and just trusting his guys a little bit more. And you could feel Matthew Bailey's presence. It's different when he is on the field. Like you just never felt that way last year. He's 6'2", 215. And I'm thinking, Joey, you're basically taking Tariq Barnes off the field from last year, who really struggled in this game, or a Dylan Rosiak, who got better as the game went along and obviously had a really good season.
But this game was kind of the catalyst to Dylan Rosiak getting a ton more snaps.
Correct. But you're replacing one of those linebackers with Matthew Bailey, who's a better athlete, actually is longer than a lot of those guys, bigger than some of those guys. And then he can cover better. So I agree with you. I think he's going to be huge because Jalen Daniels put so much stress on those edge guys. Remember, Seth Coleman and Gabe Akis gave up some plays on the edge. I'm wondering how much Jalen Daniels actually runs because he's had the injury issues and he might not have to, right? Like, because he's such a good passer, but he puts so much pressure on you. Then that opens up things for Devin Neal, who I think the world of, is a running back, one of the best guys they'll play this year, and Daniel Highshaw. Like, it just opens up those running lanes. So the interior guys on defense are going to have to be really important, but also like Matthew Bailey's going to be in space. Dylan Rosiak are going to be in space, and Matthew Bailey is going to be really big against the run. So as much as we think of a safety and pass coverage, and he can do that, I think his presence against the run is really, really important. The other one I would put here is Gabe Akis on the defensive line. Like, I think you got to have veterans because you need to be really good with gap integrity in this game, but also like they have some issues. Like they got a lot of unproven guys up front for Kansas. This is a really new offensive line with 3 new starters, and I want my best 11 on the field, and that's probably Alec Bryant. Put up your sign, Joey. Joe Barnett at times. I love the debut of the sign. But Seth Coleman and Gabe, I want those guys on the field, and I'm sure Gabe will go back and forth. And I love that he has that versatility, and Alex Bray and those guys will still play. But I really want strong dudes up front, and I think Gabe Akis playing on the interior, like those guys know what's coming at least up front because they saw it last year and got burned on it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Which brings me to a question that I've been kind of kicking around since we left Memorial Stadium on Thursday. What is the ratio of defensive line to outside linebacker that we're going to see Gabe Akis play this year?
It was like perfectly half and half the first game. That sounds right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you get into the Big Ten, and maybe you want him with his hand on the ground a little bit more with some of those bigger linemen. I don't know, but half and half feels right. It also feels like a cop-out. I worry behind him, right? I worry feel like you have more depth at outside linebacker than you have on the defensive line. And when you think about it like that, it's like, why would you move him?
Yeah, we just know more about Alec Bryant than Alex Bray, right? Like Alec Bryant has played, I don't know, 700 snaps, 800 snaps here at Illinois, and has been really solid doing it. And then Joe Born looked pretty dang good. Two uses already. I love it. No, but like that is your strength. So you're probably right. It's probably going to go more towards him on the defensive line. I think as he gets more comfortable doing it, and as I think he gets better, like he's better at that position probably than outside linebacker. So even though he had some really good reps at outside linebacker, caveat, Eastern Illinois. But yeah, the other part for me, Joe, is this was a really green defense last year. This was like Miles Scott, his first real game, right? Xavier Scott, who got an interception again, his first real game. Dylan Rosiak thrown into the fire in this one. So all those guys are back, and you hope that is where this, also with Aaron Henry, the experience of last year, and not just Kansas, but the entire season, helps pay off on defense.
I wish I had transcribed before we got on the podcast, because I asked Terrence Jamison, I said, what's different about you guys now versus a year ago? And I said, we got some fresh faces in here. You got guys who have played more snaps in here. You're right. I mean, if you go down the list, that was kind of Dylan Rosiak's coming out party at linebacker, right? Or I guess in terms of snaps, not necessarily some magnificent game. Miles Scott was still in the infant stages of his move to defensive back. The strong safety position was kind of a mess without Matthew Bailey. At this point in the season, it solidified later. At this point in the season, it was kind of a mess. Taz Nicholson was asked to be a number one corner, and that probably wasn't right for him.
It was a rough game for him.
I'm trying to think who started. Was it Strain who started opposite of Taz in that game with Xavier Scott at that star role? I'd have to double check that. There's just more. There's more snaps to them right now. Will that lead to a win? I have no earthly idea, right? But like if you're looking for reasons to be confident, these guys know their roles a little bit. They've played a full season in a lot of cases at these positions. I think you can talk about talent upgrades. We'll get to that here, Jeremy, in the next couple of questions, especially in the secondary. But yeah, I mean, and then you have new coaches who maybe have new ideas. Are those going to be groundbreaking, game-changing ideas? You know, who could say? But what does Archie McDaniel see here? What does Clint Senham see here? What does Corey Parker see here? They've spent all offseason looking at this tape. I mean, we know that. So there's clearly been a number of ideas thrown around, and I have to imagine Brett Bielema has been pretty active in defensive discussions going into this game.
Oh, yes. This game, I think, has been circled for a long time. All right, number 5.
They're not going to say it, by the way. If they win after, I don't know if it's going to be Jake Hansen victory cigar, but I think they're going to let this one go a little bit.
Does that run in the East Lake? Do they have access to cigars there? Dylan Rosiak for one. I don't see him as the one to do such a thing. But number 5.
Such a thing.
What is your biggest concern for Illinois in this matchup, Joey? Because there's a lot with that Kansas offense.
Yeah. Can you stop Devin Neal? Can you not even stop? That's probably not the right word to use. Can you contain him? Can you keep him in check at all in that game? Because last year Kansas ran for 262 yards. Yeah. That's like, if you let that happen, and then Jalen Daniels is still Jalen Daniels, things are going to be tough. Like that is going to you're going to have a sold out crowd that's going to feel like the air was let out pretty quick if you can't contain the run. And as it just so happens, Jeremy, that's one of our biggest questions we have about this defense is how does that line hold up? Gabe Akis makes you feel a little bit better in that regard, but there's still questions I have about if they can stop it. Now you're seeing a heck of a good running back coming in here.
It is so important for T-Raw Edwards, Dennis Briggs Jr., and Gabe Akis / Alex Bray to have good games, to really clog things up. Because you think of how great Johnny Newton was in this game last year and how bad the rest of his team was. But Johnny was the best player on the field, to be honest with you. And I know how good Kansas was in that game. But Johnny dominated at times by himself. But those guys don't need to do that. They just need to clog up these running lanes. And so the outside linebackers can really contain Jalen Daniels, take care of that. Those guys have to be better. But yeah, it is really important for those guys to be good because Devin Neal is legit. Like
he averaged 12 yards a carry last year against Illinois.
This rushing attack is one of the best Illinois will play all year. And I think Penn State's going to be great. I think Oregon's going to be great. Michigan, obviously, is always pretty good in the ground game. But this is going to be one of the best rushing offense because the quarterback and the running back combo. And Highshaw's really good too. Like, he's a little bit more powerful back. So I just think this is a huge test of what we thought would be the biggest weakness of this defense, which is stopping the run. So, yes, I am so concerned about that because if they're able to stay ahead of the chains, Jalen Daniels going to pick you apart, man. He's just good, and he's got good receivers, and they're going to score some points on you. You're going to have to bounce back. They're going to have a big play here. They're going to have a big play there. Like, they're good players. They're going to make some big plays, but you got to bounce back from it. So I think a key is getting a few takeaways, just to get them off the field without scoring points, right? Give the ball back to your offense. But, if you can have a few of those early, I think a good start is so important in this game, just to kind of control the pace of this thing, because it got out of hand so quick, and it can with an explosive offense like this.
What does that look like to you? What constitutes a quick start to you?
It's more just a feel thing. Like, it could be 7-7 at the end of the first quarter.
Don't go 3 and out on 3 of your first 4 possessions. Don't allow Kansas to move down the field with ease and score on 2 of their first 3 type deal.
Yeah, I don't want them having 3 possessions in the first quarter. That to me would be a solid start, because it means your offense is moving the ball, and maybe your defense is making them go long drives. So make them go longer drives. Maybe they make mistakes because they do fumble the ball. This is a Kansas team that has fumbled the ball a lot. Jalen Daniels threw a bad pick last week. Like, he was good last week, but he threw one bad pick. So that's the key. I think it's more just a feel of, like, it doesn't need to be a 14-0 lead over the first quarter, but if it's 7-7 and the possessions are minimized a little bit for Kansas, I'd feel good about it.
Yeah, the defense isn't good enough for your offense to go 3 and out to start in a couple of times. It's just not. Like, that's where things can get hairy really quickly. And I think the offense is better than what it showed last year when it did exactly that.
Right. Number 6, Joey. Let's wrap it up with this. Any personnel decisions that intrigue you for Illinois heading into game 2?
Where is Terence Brooks? Until we see him in consistent, meaningful snaps, that's a personnel decision. It is to me, because he was a huge offseason addition. He was. Illinois really displayed him as such in terms of, they put a press release out before he gets to campus, which is not something we've seen. Brett Bielema, Aaron Henry have glowed about him. But you didn't see him for anywhere but the fourth quarter with the backups against Eastern Illinois. Did that light enough in him to give Illinois coaches what they needed to see to put him out there? Because he is one of their best players defensively from a talent standpoint. He is. And you put him and Xavier Scott back on the outside, maybe Tyler Strain in the star, or you keep Scott there and Torrey Cox outside. But their best secondary combinations involve Terence Brooks. And I think, if this week, maybe it lit something, you see more of him, I don't know. Like, I really, to be honest with you, I don't know. I feel like this was not something I expected to be talking about at this point.
Yeah, you started to raise an eyebrow when, like, the last week we got to see that Caleb Patterson was still starting in that first group over him. He's clear, like, this is why you went and got a guy like him, is he's got the talent to do it. But they clearly are not seeing enough in practice, consistency wise. And I don't know what that looks like, because we don't have access to it, and they're not going to dive into this. But I still think he is going to make an impact on this team. To be honest with you, I'm interested to see if, with Tyler Strain back, does he start in that nickel, or do they like Xavier Scott, and did Torrey Cox show enough to where they're going to put him out there on a guy like Luke Grimm, who's quick, fast? That's a kind of guy I want Torrey Cox on. I do worry a little bit about Caleb Patterson going against Lawrence Arnold and some of these other, Quentin Skinner's a big play threat. It's just, he hasn't been tested. Like, Terrence Brooks has been tested in the Big 12 by Kansas. So that would be a roll of the dice for me if they went with Caleb Patterson here. I would almost understand it more if they went with Torrey Cox and Xavier Scott on the outside and Tyler Strain on the interior. So I'm really intrigued by that. I'm also intrigued offensively, Joey. They went a lot of 12 personnel. Do they go more 11 personnel? And because Kansas has 2 good outside corners, you can attack them in the middle of the field a little bit. They got a big safety in Marvin Grant, who's not the best in pass coverage. Their nickel is a little bit untested. So is this the game Zachary Franklin gets more in the slot? Is this the game Pat Bryant gets in the slot? And we see more Malik Elzy, because did Malik Elzy show enough with 2 great catches, and I thought phenomenal blocking. Like, it's everything you thought Malik Elzy could be when they got here, albeit against Eastern Illinois. But Like there were good signs from that game from Malik Elzy. So I'm just interested to see if Barry Lunny, I like the two running back stuff with Aiden Lawfrey in the slot. Do we see more of that? That gets your best 11 on the field. But I'm just wondering, is there less two tight end sets and more three wide out sets in this game?
I have hitched my wagon to this is the debut of Zachary Franklin in the slot. They've been really, really quiet about it. They've kind of let out like, yeah, we've got a lot of guys, but they have never wanted to come out and be like, hey, we sure do love Zachary, what he could do for us in the slot. They have been very reserved about how they've commented about that. I think this is a game. I think it was reserved for this game. You didn't see it at all against Eastern Illinois.
Colin Dixon, steady dose
Colin
of
Dixon, yes. I feel like, especially as you mentioned, what Malik Elzy showed kind of exactly what you said, what we thought Malik Elzy can be as a college football player. You feel comfortable with him out on the field. You obviously feel comfortable with Pat Bryant out on the field. Now you can put Zachary Franklin in the slot, still kind of unload your whole offense here, right? And maybe at times, yeah, you do have Aiden Lawfrey in the slot, because I love those two back sets. I think I was a little surprised they showed them against Eastern Illinois.
And that got me in my head going like, okay, they showed this for a reason. They want Kansas gearing up for this. So what's the counter? Like,
right.
Is Kansas going to be ready for it? It's like, oh, Lawfrey's getting the ball. And then what do? Is it a play action where they go deep on that play? Like something's going to happen in that formation that's different, right? Like they're going to have a counter to it. So I'm really interested in that. The other thing offensively is, Brandon Henderson got on the field, and I'm wondering if we see more of a rotation on the offensive line, because there were some inside runs that didn't work out well for Illinois. I thought the tackles were great. I thought Josh Geske was really good for the most part. But I'm interested to see if, Brandon Henderson gets some actual reps in the 5-man offensive line rather than just the 6, because they've shown that they would like to use a rotation at times. They did with Jordan Slaughter off the bench. I'm wondering if Henderson gets that kind of role.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of value and continuity on the offensive line, and that's the furthest thing from what they had a little bit before this game and definitely after this game last season. But I think if we've learned anything, Jeremy, over the last 18 months or whatever since Brandon Henderson has been on campus, he's earned their trust in a hurry. And putting him out there in those mini barge situations kind of tells me that. And I asked Bart Miller, and he said, hey, yeah, he's a guy that I'm going to get him on the field. I mean, he's why he started snapping the football, because you want to get him on the field in whatever way possible. So, yeah, I think that's worthwhile to wonder if Brandon Henderson could be more involved offensively, or if you want to lean into the continuity that you just feel like you haven't had for the better part of a calendar year. I guess maybe not a calendar year, but prior to the 8 months after that game.
For sure, this whole offseason, they've had the same starting 5 throughout this entire time.
And I think there's a ton of value there.
Yeah. Any other thoughts you want to get in on Illinois heading into this game? I got one big picture thing about this game, but any other people you want to mention?
No, I'm the running back breakdown, the carry breakdown, the snap breakdown. I'm really
it's got to be Fagan and Lawfrey. Like those are your dynamic guys.
I would agree with that. And you can do a lot with them, right? You can do a lot in different things with those two. I think we covered the wide receivers. No, that's it, man. Like what's the counter to the way Kansas attacks your linebackers? Because they didn't throw that away. That's still something they're going to try to expose. Does James Krutz help in that category? We also, and I don't know that we'd ask, I guess it's probably worth asking Brett Bielema tomorrow. This doesn't necessarily play into attacking the linebacker, but we didn't see any Kenenna Odeluga taking defensive snaps against Eastern Illinois. So it's just kind of little nuances in there that I'm curious about, but the big pictures are pretty obviously the big pictures, right?
I'm excited because we're going to learn a heck of a lot more about this team.
Oh.
For better or worse. Like there's going to be a lot to talk about after this game. And you think about what a win would mean for this team to get to 2-0 and have, I think, a realistic chance to be thinking about 4-0, right? Like Nebraska is not going to be easy on the road, but like, if you can do that, like you can start thinking about dreaming about that stuff and thinking about, hey, maybe at some point Illinois can be ranked this season. Like that's what this kind of win does. But if you lose, it's like, man, this path gets really narrow to a postseason just because of the schedule you have. But if you go and win in Nebraska, that changes that. This isn't like a make or break game for the season, but man, it feels like it could make a lot for this season.
And it feels like, look, a lot could break if they get rolled by Kansas, right? Like if Illinois loses, which is well within the realm, right? Like I don't know that I would pick Illinois right now today. But if they lose and they get absolutely, beat down like they did a year ago, people are going to say, I don't want to be fooled again, right? Like I'm good for a little while here. Earn me back, and that probably means a good run in this later part of the month and into October, and the schedule isn't set up for that. So, if it's a competitive game, people are going to be ticked, right? Like losses don't make people happy, but I do think like you can show enough in a loss in this game where people don't say no thanks.
Yeah, and you could be like, hey, they play that way against Nebraska, they win. They play that way against Purdue, they win. They play that way against Penn State, they give themselves a chance, right? Like probably not going to win, but at least you're giving yourself a chance. So I was going to ask you, is there any way this could be a good performance and not win? No, because that's not where you're at as a program, right? Like,
you're wanting to win these games.
Like there's no, but there is like a way that if they lost in a competitive, fun game, that's like, okay, this team should be favored against Purdue at home. They should be favored in a lot of their final 4 games. It's just with the schedule the way it breaks, it's time to win a big home game.
It is. And you're right. You made a really good point, Jeremy, that a lot of these big wins have come on the road. Wisconsin, Minnesota's, Maryland, I thought was a really big win last season. Minnesota again in 2021. I mean, you can go down the list, and they've had Penn State, of course. They've had those moments, but you think back to, and this was they ultimately squeaked into a bowl game, but think about the atmosphere after knocking off Wisconsin in 2019, and just kind of that, oh, okay, like this is, maybe they can do this. I'm not trying to say this Kansas is that Wisconsin by any stretch of the imagination, but there's something to be said about doing that where your people are. Yeah. There is, and people will buy in wholehearutely for that.
All right, we're gonna have plenty of coverage leading into this game. Our preview and picks are getting underway. I'm staying with my season game by game prediction, so you'll see that come out on Thursday if you didn't see it the first time. But I think it's going to be a different game. I think it's going to be a competitive game, and whoever makes fewer mistakes, obviously, I think is going to win this. But I think Kansas is probably going to get a different opponent. But Kansas is really good. Like the offense is just really, really explosive. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So check that all out at IlliniInquirer.com. Joey's going to have a great story on Matthew Bailey, who I think is a huge key to this game, combating that Kansas offense. So you'll see that coming up. And Illinois' got a big list of visitors, recruiting visitors coming in this weekend. You can read that at IlliniInquirer.com. So they are building this up for a big potential, possibility for the program. So, all right, for Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on YouTube as well. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer.